Thank you for those words, Reverend. The House will come to order. Please stand for the presentation of colors this morning by the Colorado National Guard.
So proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleam, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we won were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Okay. This morning, the pledge will be led by those who have served in the military. So Representatives, United States Air Force Colonel retired Terry Carver, Tim Geithner, United States Air Force retired Ron Hanks, United States Army Colonel retired Richard Holtorf, United States Army Captain Mike Lynch, United States Army Captain Patrick Neville, United States Army Chief Warrant Officer 2 retired David Ortiz, United States Navy Commander retired Pico, retired United States Air Force Senior Airman Tom Sullivan. Please join us in the well for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to thank Sergeant First Class John Piera, Sergeant Ryan Settle, Sergeant First Class Nicholas Tyler, and Sergeant First Class Michael McNeil, all from the 3rd Battalion of the 157th Field Artillery Regiment, for presenting the colors. Thank you very much. And let's all thank Master Sergeant Matthew Miller from the Colorado Air National Guard, who led us in singing the national anthem. Mr. Shebel, please call the roll.
Representatives. Amabile. I know I saw her somewhere. Bacon. Baisley is excused today, actually. Benavidez. Burnett. Byrd. Representative Byrd is excused. Bockenfeld. Basenecker. Bradfield. Caravale.
Here.
Carver. Catlin. Cutter. Doherty. Duran is excused. Esgar. Exum.
Morning, sir.
Froelich. Geithner. Gonzalez Gutierrez. Is she here? Yeah. Okay. Gray. I think I see her. Hanks. Herod.
Here.
Holtorf. Hooten.
Here.
Judah. Kennedy. Kip. Larson. Lindsay. Montine. Luck. See Luck today? Representative Luck? I haven't seen Luck today. Okay. Luck is excused. Lynch. McCluskey. McCormick. McKean. McLaughlin. Michelson Janae. Millica. Neville.
Here.
Ortiz. Pelton. Pelton. Representative. Okay, Pelton's here. Pico. Ransom. Rich. Ricks. Representative Ricks. She's late? Okay. Is excused. Roberts. Sandridge.
Here.
Sirota. Snyder. Soper. Sullivan. Tipper. Tatone. Valdez A. I know I saw him back there. Valdez D.
Good morning, Colorado.
Van Beber. Van Winkle.
Here.
Weissman. Will. Williams.
Here.
Woodrow. Woog. Young. And Mr. Speaker. Amabile came in, by the way. He didn't. Oh, and so did Luck.
With 61 present and 4 excused, we have a quorum. Representative Pico.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Journal of Thursday, February 3rd, 2022, be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
Members, you have heard the motion that the journal be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right. All those opposed, no. Oh my gosh, it's Friday, and the ayes actually have it, and the motion is approved. Members, we are going to be in a brief recess as we wait for the Senate. For the Senate to come over to do Military Appreciation Day. They have a quick resolution. We have one introduction of a resolution here, and then we'll go into a brief recess until the Senate comes and joins us, and then we'll get started. With that, Mr. Schiebel, introduction of resolution.
House Concurrent Resolution 1003 by Representative Geithner, also Senators Bridges and Lundin, concerning to the registered electors of the state of Colorado an amendment to the Colorado Constitution concerning the extension of the property tax exemption for the qualifying seniors and disabled veterans to the surviving spouse of United States Armed Forces service member who died in the line of duty or veteran whose death resulted from a service-related injury or disease.
House Concurrent Resolution 1003 will be assigned to the Committee on State, Civic, Veterans, and Military Affairs. With that, Madam Majority Leader. And members, I think we'll hold announcements and introductions until after we do our business, unless there's a really important one to do right now. Seeing none. Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess. Again, members, don't go far. We're just waiting on the Senate to do some business to come over and join us so we can begin the rest of our day. So relax and enjoy.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in a brief recess. Good morning, everyone. The House will come back to order. Please find your seats. Before we get started, I just want to recognize that this is one of the best days of the session, where both members of the House and the Senate come together to recognize the sacrifices of those who have served our country. And Military Appreciation Day is one of the best traditions of this institution. Because of COVID, it hasn't been the same the last couple of years. So it's great to see everybody. It's great to see the gallery full. Thank you everyone for your patience this morning. And this is a great moment and a great day, and I look forward to sharing it with everyone. With that, Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, just a run of show real quick. All resolutions will actually be moved by the House sponsors, read at length, after which the House sponsors of each resolution will make brief comments about the resolution itself. We will do this for all 9 resolutions, and I wanted to make sure that the Senate sponsors, although they can't speak until we're in recess again, are here to hear the resolutions that they're a part of. Once we finish those, we will recess and allow comments from the House and Senate members, and the Republicans will have about 45 minutes to speak, and the Dems will have about 45 minutes to speak. So we're going to be kind of watching the clock just to make sure that everybody has their chance to say exactly what they want to say on this floor, because as the Speaker said, this is one of the most important days we celebrate here at the Capitol, and want to make sure everybody has space and time to honor the military on Military Appreciation Day. So I appreciate your patience and your time this morning, and look forward to hearing the resolutions.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title of the House Joint Resolution 1006.
House Joint Resolution 1006 by Representatives Young and Carver, also Senators Zenzinger and Gardner, concerning recognition of military, veterans, and MIA POW Appreciation Day.
Representative Carver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We move for the adoption of HJR 1006 and request that the resolution be read at length.
It's a proper motion. Mr. Schiebel.
Whereas Colorado has a proud and distinguished history of dedicated military service by men and women of this state, whose courage, heroism, and sacrifice preserves the liberties and democratic way of life set forth in our state and federal constitution. And whereas Colorado is home to a significant number of military installations, including Fort Carson, the United States Air Force Academy, Buckley Air Force Base, Peterson Air Force Base, Schriever Air Force Base, Cheyenne Mountain Air Force Station, and the United States Space Force, that contribute not only to the national security of our nation, but to the economic health of our state. And whereas Colorado benefits significantly from the presence and military service of more than 49,000 men and women in our state who serve in the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard, the branch reserves, the Colorado National Guard, and the Civil Air Patrol. And whereas the men and women of the Colorado National Guard have served in defense of our nation and as the first military responders in support of civil authorities during domestic emergencies, and are celebrating their 162nd anniversary this year. And whereas in times of conflict around the globe, it is particularly appropriate to recognize the Coloradans in all branches and components of the armed service who serve around the world to protect the security and peace of our nation and other nations. And whereas, in addition to active members of the armed services, Colorado is the proud home of more than 400,000 military veterans who have served their country long and well, and who bring great honor and distinction to the state. And whereas Colorado is home not only to active duty service personnel and veterans, but also to the countless family members of these men and women who display the same dedication, courage, and sacrifice. And whereas we should never forget the sacrifices made for us by the 94 service members from the Colorado Declared Mission in Action, or prisoners of war, missing in action, or prisoners of war while defending the principles of liberty and justice in conflicts in Korea, Laos, and Vietnam. And whereas disparate and diverse groups of Coloradans, such as persons who are African American, Latino or Latina, or Hispanic, in addition to men and women of all backgrounds, are bound together in the United States Armed Service by their selfless dedication to the spirit of our nation, the ideals of freedom and democracy, and the cause of democracy and stability around the globe. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 73rd General Assembly and the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring in herein, that we, the members of the 73rd General Assembly, hereby extend our heartfelt gratitude to our state's veterans, past and present, to all military men and women currently serving in the armed services, and to the family members of our active duty personnel and veterans, and that we remember and honor those prisoners of war and those missing in action from previous conflicts. That we express our continued partnership with and support of Fort Carson and maintain our strong commitment to supporting ongoing military training at the Mountain Post. And that we encourage the citizens of Colorado to join in the celebration of Colorado's Military, Veterans, and MIA POW Appreciation Day, in recognition and honor of the thousands of fellow citizens in the military who protect and serve their communities, state, and country.
Representative Carver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, it is an honor for me to be on this resolution with Representative Young this morning. The resolution speaks for itself, but I also just want to commend, and I know we have some representatives in the gallery, you know, the VFW, the American Legion, the many veterans groups that tirelessly, with steadfast dedication, regardless of the winds of political dialogue that ebb and flow, that are there for the veterans and their families and participating in patriotic events. And would be remiss if I did not call out the American Legion Post 9/11 in Palmer Lake, which I am a proud member of, every year doing fundraiser for Gold Star families and the POW MIA ceremony for the missing soldier. Thank you.
Representative Young.
It is an honor to serve on this resolution with you, Representative Carver. I want to give a brief description of a face of someone who represents what we're talking about today. In 1942, there was two young men studying at the University of Notre Dame, and they both ended their studies to enlist in World War II. One of them was my father. The other was eventually Colonel Kelly Cook, who fought not only in World War II as a fighter pilot, but also the Korean War, and eventually in the Vietnam War, where on November 10th, 1967, he was shot down, and his family at home, his wife Joanne and his 6 children, spent decades wondering what had resulted in his crash. They didn't find out till several decades later that he had successfully ejected and was captured and eventually died from his injuries. He, as part of his career, taught at the Air Force Academy. And I'm happy to say 2 of his daughters who live here in Colorado are here today with us, Kathleen Cook and Maureen Kozak. I'd like to acknowledge the sacrifices they and many other families have made, having family members who are prisoners of war and missing in action.
Thank you to both of you. The question before us is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1006. Seeing no objection to a voice vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Joint Resolution 1006 is adopted. Representative Young.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we add all those present to co-sponsors as part of the roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Young. Seeing no objection, this morning's roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to House Joint Resolution 1007.
House Joint Resolution 1007 by Representatives Harrod and Bacon, also Senators Coleman and Buckner, concerning recognition of African American veterans.
Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Joint Resolution 1007. Ask that it be read at length.
That is a proper motion. Mr. Shebel.
Whereas the military history of African Americans spans from the arrival of the first enslaved Africans during the colonial history of the United States to the present day. And whereas African Americans have participated in every war fought by or within the United States, including the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the Civil War, the Spanish-American War, the Indian Wars, World Wars I and II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And whereas nearly 198,000 African American soldiers served during the Civil War, roughly 350,000 African American soldiers served during World War I, and another 1.25 million African American soldiers served during World War II, with many more African Americans serving in the years since World War II. And whereas on July 26, 1948, President Harry S. Truman signed Executive Order 9981, integrating the military and mandating equality of treatment and opportunity for African American soldiers. And whereas desegregation of the military was not complete for several years, and all African American units persisted well into the Korean War. And whereas the last all African American unit was not disbanded until 1954. And whereas until the Korean War, African American veterans were precluded from direct access to benefits from the Veterans Administration, which included VA housing loans, employment assistance, unemployment benefits, and health care. And whereas African Americans continue to serve in the United States military, providing exemplary service, duty, integrity, dedication, and commitment to our great nation. And whereas currently 17% of the United States Armed Forces are African American. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 73rd General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that we, the General Assembly, in recognition of the heroic efforts and great sacrifice of African American veterans, hereby encourage this commemoration throughout the House of Representatives and Senate.
Representative Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, colleagues. We are grateful for this resolution, but in particular, to tell the story of the African American soldier who represents a deep patriotism beyond what can be seen at the surface. To be able to come to fight together for a country that may not love you, it is certainly an expression of love to be able to wear a uniform. But we also hope to live as a reminder of the soul of our nation, as an example of what we will and will not tolerate when it comes to the treatment of humanity. But throughout U.S. history, the service of African Americans have really represented three distinct themes for freedom. The first theme being that for freedom for our nation and freedom for our bodies. Whether it's Boston's All Black Bucks of America in the Revolutionary War, to the 9th and 10th Cavalries and their 24th and 25th Infantries as our Buffalo Soldiers, we fought for the freedom of our nation and the freedom for our lives. The second distinct phase is freedom for oppression. And throughout World War I, World War II, and Korea, to go and to be able to serve was a representation of the ideals of America, and to represent that they were ideals bigger than America, being able to live in a place where one was free to engage in their government. And so you can imagine at the liberation of either those in the South Pacific or in Europe, what better way to demonstrate that freedom is truly possible than through the service of an African American. And then the last freedom was the freedom to be, the freedom to lead, the freedom to simply own the name American. And that phase came through post-Korea as folks navigated through the imbalances that we saw throughout the execution of the GI Bill, but also to be able to lead and to become officers in the military. And so the picture that you see behind us is a picture of my grandfather, Brigadier General Frank Benkin, who was a World War II veteran and Korea veteran, who had to fight to be able to seek his officer status. And so just wanted to be able to end with a quote from the late Colin Powell as well, who said, "I'll never forget for a day or for an hour or for a minute that I climbed to my position on the backs of the courageous African-American men and women who went before me." So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bacon. Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think my colleague from Denver said it well. African Americans have a rich history of serving in the armed forces in this country, and of course, right here in Colorado. I'm proud to be the military brat of my mom, Jackie Herod, who served in the Army Nurse Corps and brought our family here from Oakland, California, because she felt the military was going to be the way that we had access to education and equality. And I'm proud to say that my brother and I both benefited from that sacrifice that she made, leaving her family, serving this country, going across seas, and birthing me in Germany. She also met my father, who served in the Army as well. He was enlisted. She was an officer. I got to tell you, there was quite the scandal. And the secret, of course, was revealed when my brother was born in Monterey, California, and they got married shortly thereafter. The Herod legacy is one of service. My grandfather served as well in Water Valley, Mississippi. He left to serve the Army, again, to bring equality and opportunity to his family in the South. He then, after retirement and serving, he then went on to desegregate the schools in Mississippi as one of the first Black principals in the school system down there. My father, Michael Herod, my uncle, Uncle Johnny, my Uncle Tony, my Aunt Barbara, my Aunt Val, and then, of course, the grandkids. There are 4 or 5 that currently serve. And I have to give a shout out to my mom again, who is retired Army, retired out of Fort Carson, and to my brother, who is currently serving in the Navy as an anesthesiologist. And then I just want to tell a quick story. So in this journey of military service and service to our country, I have to, I might get a little emotional, speak of my mom, who is now in long-term care. And I got to tell you, the continued fight for folks who are serving in the military, who have served our country, to be respected and treated with dignity is ongoing, regardless of race. We have to do more to make sure that our veterans have access to the services, the mental health care, the medical treatment that they deserve, and that our military families are supported as our military veterans transition on into the later parts of their lives and then on to the other side with our Creator. And so I just want you all to keep that in mind as we talk about military service. There are so many who have served, but so many who have been forgotten. And I give a shout out to our veterans homes here in Colorado, who are doing such amazing work to make sure that that Coloradan veterans are treated with that dignity and respect. But I gotta tell you, it's a journey, and it's one that I hope that we can continue to address in the General Assembly and get folks what they need. So thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Herod. Thank you, Representative Bacon. The question before us is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1007. Seeing no objection to a voice vote, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Joint Resolution 1007 is adopted. Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask that the morning roll call be added as co-sponsors.
Seeing no objection, the morning roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Joint Resolution 1008.
House Joint Resolution 1008 by Representatives Ortiz and Holtorf, also Senators Rodriguez and Moreno, concerning recognition of the contributions of Latina and Latino veterans.
Representative Ortiz.
Mr. Speaker, we move for the adoption of HJR 10008 and request that the resolution be read at length.
That is a proper motion. Mr. Schiebel.
Whereas, being a diverse group with a shared history and culture that identifies as Latino, Hispanic, and Chicano, among many other shared identities, including many faiths, orientations, and all gender identities, who have fought in support of the United States and the cause of freedom in every American conflict since the American Revolution, when Colonel Bernardo Bernardo del Galvez, the Spanish governor of the Louisiana Territories, and his men assisted General George Washington and the Continental Army in defeating the British forces that were advancing into the then southwestern U.S. territories. And whereas, despite 150 years of fighting with distinction in support of the United States, it was not until World War II that Latina and Latino service members became a truly forceful presence. It is estimated that nearly 500,000 Latina and Latino Americans, often the children of immigrants who entered the United States in previous decades, fought for the cause of freedom in that war, including the 158th Regimental Combat Team and the 141st Infantry Regiment, which consisted of all Spanish-speaking soldiers. And whereas in 1948, Dr. Hector Garcia of Corpus Christi, Texas, founded an American GI Forum as a means of addressing cases in which Latina and Latino veterans were being denied services by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs under the GI Bill, including educational, medical, housing, and other basic benefits. Dr. Garcia and the American GI Forum worked diligently to secure equal access to all benefits, and in 1984, Dr. Garcia was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Ronald Reagan. And whereas in the Korean War, the all-Puerto Rican 65th Infantry Regiment, also known as the Borinqueniers, served 3 years in service in the mountainous terrain of Busan, Korea, and further efforts were awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, a Meritorious Unit Commendation, and 2 Republic of Korea Presidential Unit Citations. In 2016, the unit was recognized with a Congressional Gold Medal. And whereas the Vietnam War, in which more than 80,000 Latina and Latino service members served, 13 of whom were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, many of these Latina and Latino soldiers were drawn to the military by the opportunity to transcend their working class roots and by the opportunity afforded to them by the GI Bill. And whereas, in total, 61 Latina and Latino veterans have been awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for their services to the United States Armed Forces, and whereas more than 156,000 Latina and Latino service members are currently active duty members of the armed forces, and more than 1.2 million Latina and Latino veterans call the United States home. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 73rd General Assembly of the State of Colorado and the Senate concurring herein, that we, the members of the General Assembly, recognize and commend the efforts and sacrifice of the millions of Latina and Latino men and women who have served the cause of freedom in and alongside the armed forces of the United States.
Representative Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm going to speak from the heart, so this is either going to go really well or really poorly. But I really think it's important that we do resolutions like this, recognizing Latino, Latina, Hispanic, Chicanos that have served, recognizing the African Americans that have served, LGBTQ, various members of our community that have served. Although there's something unique that happens in service, where everyone becomes family regardless of who you are and where you come from, those individual and cultural experiences don't just go away. Those experiences that we have as a Latino or Latina in this nation, or as a black man and woman in this nation, do not just disappear. But I believe that they're the source of one of our greatest strengths, which is the diversity. I mean, you look at what it took to win in World War II. It was Jewish scientists and engineers coming together with the Navajo code talkers, coming together with Alan Turing, a gay man that broke the code that the Germans used. Our diversity was our greatest strength that helped us overcome one of the greatest evils that we saw in the world. Now, as far as my family goes, I'm first-generation American on my mom's side, but third-generation service member on my dad's side, going back to World War II. So I have both of those experiences where the border crossed us, but also my mom migrating from Mexico when she was 15 years old. And we don't forget our stories. I don't forget that I heard stories growing up about Padre Hidalgo, and Miguel de Allende, and Benito Juarez, Emiliano Zapata. But I take those stories and the lessons that I learned from them and give everything I've got to this nation that I love, that I know is the best place on earth, because of the promise that it gives to everyone, and the fight that we all need to work together to accomplish, which is to make sure those ideals embodied in the Constitution apply to everyone equitably. And I know that everyone in this room, although we might have different ways of getting there, desires that same thing as well. That's what it means to belong to the American family, is we take our individual or cultural experiences and come together to make this nation stronger because of the promise not only that it gives us as citizens, but the rest of the world. So that's why I'm humbled to be on this resolution with my peers and to be supported by my peers here. We come from many different experiences, but we are united in our love and service and support of this nation.
Thank you, Representative Ortiz. Representative Holtorf.
Portavoz de la casa, es un placer servir con usted, señor.
It's an honor to serve with you too, Representative Holtorf.
Gracias, caballero. Glad his Spanish is a little tuned up today. Thank you. Veteranos hispanoamericanos, miembros del servicio pasado y presente de todos orígenes, declarar nuestro servicio a la defensa por los siglos y en el presente en la defensa de la Constitución de los Estados Unidos de América. Las referencias cualquiera de etnia, color, género, orientaciones no tengan ninguna referencia al rango de servicio orgulloso de nuestros miembros en la defensa y de la patria de nuestro país, los Estados Unidos de América. Estamos todos nosotros hombro a hombro como hermanos y hermanas a proteger los Estados Unidos de América, la nación más grandiosa en el mundo. Gracias por la oportunidad y a mis caballeros aquí de las dos casas de este capital.
Thank you, Representative Holtorf. Seeing no objection to a voice vote, the motion before us is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1008. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Joint Resolution 1008 is adopted. Representative Holtorf.
Mr. Speaker, we move the current roll of the House be added as co-sponsors.
Seeing no objection, the current roll call of the House will be added as co-sponsors. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Joint Resolution 1009.
House Joint Resolution 1009 by Representatives Weissman and Hanks, also Senators Donovan and Liston, concerning honoring Colorado veterans on the 77th anniversary of the end of World War II.
Representative Weissman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We move HJR 1009 and ask that it be read at length.
That is a proper motion. Mr. Schiebel.
Whereas during the years 1941 to 1945, some 250,000 of Colorado's sons and daughters served in World War II, and of those, over 3,500 were killed in action or from wounds suffered on the battlefield. And whereas of those 3,586 Coloradans who gave the last full measure of devotion, offering their lives so that others may live freely, over half never came home. Their remains uncovered or buried in American military cemeteries around the world. And whereas the state of Colorado has a rich history of service in World War II, as home of the famed 10th Mountain Division, which trained in the Colorado Rockies at Camp Hale on Tennessee Pass, and the Colorado National Guard's 157th Infantry Regiment, which spent 511 days in continuous combat during World War II, including 4 amphibious landings. Under the command of Captain Felix Sparks, the 157th Infantry Regiment deliberated the Dachau concentration camp. Members of both units from Colorado are honored on the Colorado Freedom Memorial in Aurora. And whereas the Colorado Freedom Memorial, dedicated in 2013, honors all Colorado veterans killed in action since the Spanish-American War, and all 3,586 of those killed in World War II are included, making the Colorado Freedom Memorial the only memorial in Colorado to honor all of our fallen by name in one place. And whereas the Colorado Freedom Memorial pays tribute to the men and women of Colorado who served in World War II, those who gave all, and those who returned home to build Colorado into the beautiful state it is today. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 73rd General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that we, the General Assembly, in recognition of the heroic efforts and great sacrifice of World War II veterans from Colorado and across the United States, hereby recognize this commemoration of the 77th anniversary of the end of World War II and encourage support throughout the House of Representatives and the Senate.
Representative Weissman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I appreciate the chance to speak about this resolution and the memory of our Second World War and veterans of that era. The last several years of loss and sacrifice that we've all been going through have had me thinking back more to what that time from 1939 to 1945 must have been. You know, I think it was the greatest collective sacrifice and effort that our country set forth in all of the 20th century. Whatever else is wrong and challenging to us in our time, I think looking back on that time, we should reckon ourselves fortunate that we are not in the midst of something of that magnitude. But with every passing year, the numbers of those still with us who bring that living memory with them to us diminishes. I looked up on the website of the National World War II Museum, and according to them, fewer than 250,000 of the 16 million who served in that time are still with us, and we know that we're losing more every day. You know, some of the people who served were both of my grandfathers and two great uncles. When I was growing up, they basically never talked about those experiences. Only long after they passed away did I learn that one of my great uncles had flown in the 447th Bomb Group in Europe and was shot down, managed to eject and parachute out and survived. Great uncle on my other side of the family was torpedoed, and he survived too. You know, to the point that my colleague from Arapahoe County made, both my grandfather and one of those great uncles had come to this country fleeing the pogroms. They were Jewish immigrants, and they contributed to the effort that we were going through in that country in their own ways. And my other grandfather was born of Irish immigrants who fled the famine. To learn from history, I think that we should strive to learn personally from those who have that memory, who served and who lived through those times. Both those who wore the uniform, and even just if we're lucky enough to still have relatives who lived through that time as civilians at home, even if they were children. But I think it's also important to remember and respect that those who carry those kind of memories may not want to dredge them up. Lastly, and in the spirit of remembering history, I just want to lift up the Colorado Freedom Memorial, and I'm grateful that that is mentioned in this resolution. For folks who don't know, it's actually not a state effort. It is an effort of a charitable foundation that was the work of many, many years of fundraising and advocacy to build that site in North Aurora. It's actually about 10 minutes walking from my house in the district that I represent. They have done the work to pull together the names of all of those who gave their lives in the line of duty from World War II and every other conflict dating since the Spanish-American War and up to the present day. And several years ago, they did something that was really pretty neat and remarkable because, as we heard and as we know, it is not always possible for service members who make the ultimate sacrifice in a theater abroad to come home physically. The Freedom Memorial Foundation did the work to bring them home symbolically. They acquired soil from military grave sites all over the world where soldiers from Colorado are known to have been interred, so that at least in spirit they came home to us at the Freedom Memorial site. And in commemoration of those who served in World War II and otherwise, I would just encourage folks to visit sometime. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Weissman. Representative Hanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 1863 at Gettysburg, Lincoln made his famous address, which began 77 years ago. 80 after our Civil War, the citizens of our great nations joined together in the Second Great War, fighting tyranny on a global scale. 80 after that great war, we stand here today to honor the 16 million Americans that served in uniform in World War II. At the end of 2021, about 240,000 of those 16 million remain. Every day, about 250 pass away. By the end of this year, we will be down to about 175,000. Colorado is still the current home of 3,500 World War II vets by that 2021 statistic. The National World War II Museum is in New Orleans, Louisiana. The American Battlefield Monuments Commission operates 26 permanent military cemeteries in 17 foreign countries. They are beautiful, they are glorious, and they are amazing. If you ever go to a foreign land in which our soldiers fought, I encourage you to go find one and visit. You will be overwhelmed. And I want to tell you a brief story of France and going to Normandy in 2016. It was not an anniversary of D-Day, it was not a significant anniversary year, just a sunny day in coastal France. For the hours as we drove in from Germany, as we drove to those beaches, Juneau, Omaha, Sword, Utah, Gold, the French houses and landscape were adorned with French flags, British flags, Canadian flags, and American flags. 75 plus years later, they had not forgotten the American soldiers. 80 after the Great War in Europe, Africa, Asia, the Atlantic, and the Pacific, neither should we. God bless our veterans, and God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hanks. Representative Weissman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We move that the present roll call be added as co-sponsors.
Let's vote, and then we'll do that. Seeing no objection, the question before us is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1009. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Joint Resolution 1009 is adopted. Representative Weissman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now we move that the present roll call be added to the resolution as co-sponsors.
That is the proper motion. Seeing no objection, this morning's roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Joint Resolution 1010.
House Joint Resolution 1010 by Representatives Sullivan and Pico, also Senators Fields and Rankin, concerning the recognition and remembrance of military veterans in Colorado who served in the Vietnam War.
Representative Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We move for the adoption of the House Joint Resolutions number 1010 and request that the resolution be read at length.
That is the proper motion. Mr. Schiebel.
Whereas United States military involvement in the Vietnam War began in the Republic of South Vietnam in the 1950s and continued until 1975, involving North Vietnamese regular forces and Viet Cong guerrilla forces in armed conflict with the United States Armed Forces and the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. And whereas during this period, more than 2,700,000 American soldiers, both volunteers and draftees, served tours of duty in Vietnam, with a total of more than 9 million active duty military personnel in what was an extremely long, difficult, and complex war. And whereas more than 58,220 members of the United States Armed Forces, including 623 Coloradans, lost their lives in Vietnam. And more than 300,000 members of the United States Armed Forces were wounded. And whereas, in addition, more than 2,500 members of the United States Armed Forces were listed as prisoners of war or missing in action, including 41 Coloradans, 24 of whom remain unaccounted for. And whereas, according to the Denver Regional Office of the Federal Department of Veterans Affairs, as of 2014, an estimated 7 million members of the United States Armed Forces who served their country during the Vietnam era are still alive today, including more than 120,000 Coloradans. And whereas on January 27, 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed, which required the release of all United States POWs held in North Vietnam and the withdrawal of all United States Armed Forces from South Vietnam. And whereas the United States Armed Forces completed the withdrawal of combat units and combat support units from South Vietnam by March 30th, 1973. And whereas on April 30th, 1975, North Vietnamese regular forces captured Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, marking the official end of the Vietnam War. And whereas as American military personnel completed their tours of duty in Vietnam, they returned home to a citizenry that was divided in its opinions of that conflict, and many people failed to distinguish their political and philosophical viewpoints towards the war from the individuals who had served. And whereas in the intervening decades, our citizenry has come to understand more clearly the importance of recognizing and respecting the service of military veterans, regardless of any other opinions or issues. And whereas the need for a formal recognition of the return of veterans from the Vietnam War is as important now as ever, not only for those veterans who served, but for all citizens. And whereas April 30th, 2022 marks the 47th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 73rd General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, hereby honor the service and sacrifices of the military veterans in Colorado who served in Vietnam, including the South Vietnamese soldiers who served alongside American troops. Recognize the particular challenges faced by many of these veterans, both while serving in Vietnam and upon returning home. Express our appreciation for their fortitude, their activism on behalf of fellow veterans, their steadfast patriotism, their many accomplishments and contributions, and the leadership they have shown to their families, community organizations, and the state, and encourage all Coloradans to remember the sacrifices made by Vietnam veterans.
Representative Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't prepare. Normally I'll prepare something to say because I was trying to think of, is there something that I could say that hasn't already been said, or wasn't quite sure how to put things into words on this. And then today when I read it was the military veterans in Colorado, I thought that was kind of different than maybe what we had done in the past, or that's the way I saw it. Before I thought we kind of talked about the Vietnam War in its totality, and now it was just the vets from Colorado. So I thought this past summer I went to Leadville for the Irish Miners Memorial that's being built there, and when you go into the cemetery there's a big memorial that I'm sure a lot of cemeteries have, and that one is all about all of the men and women who served in the military over the years who are from, that area. And I always kind of struggle with memorials because I'm not sure who those are for. If they're for the people whose names are on there and their families, because I've always thought they know what this is all about. They know what they've done. They know what this all means to them. What these memorials are for is for us, people like me, to stand there and read, and see the names and try to think of who they are and what they meant, and that's what I always do. I look at all of the names and read them and see who they were. I start from the furthest one and work my way back, because that's what we should do. And as hard as that is for those families, we need to remember all of them. That's really what those families want. They want us to remember. And we've talked about, our military men and women who sometimes have a difficult time talking about what they've been through. And every once in a while, they do want to open up. And we have to be there for them. So when they're ready, be there. Listen to them, because that's all they want. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Sullivan. Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're here to remember all of those who served in the Vietnam War. That includes all of those who went to Vietnam and fought within theater, Every ethnic group, every religion, every background fought there, fought together, brothers and sisters in arms. And that's what this country was. Those of us who served during that time, my air wing loaded aboard a ship that went the other direction, so I'm a Vietnam era veteran, not a Vietnam vet. But I served with many of those, and remember all the stories that they told, and all the sacrifices, and friends and shipmates and colleagues who didn't come back. And we're here today to remember all of those who served during that time, whether they came back or not, all of those from Colorado, all of those from the country, and our allies. While there's some controversy on our involvement, there was no such controversy within the armed forces. We answered the call and we went where we were told to go. And I offer my thanks to those, my shipmates and colleagues who served in that time, and a prayer for those who didn't come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Pico. The question before us is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1010. Seeing no objection to a voice vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Joint Resolution 1010 is adopted. Representative Pico.
We move that the current roll call of the House be added as co-sponsors.
That is a proper motion. Seeing no objection, this morning's roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to House Joint Resolution 1011.
House Joint Resolution 1011 by Representatives Burnett and Geithner, also Senators Kolker and Lundin, concerning honoring Gold Star families.
Assistant Minority Leader Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We move for the adoption of HJR 1011 and request that the resolution be read at length.
That is a proper motion. Mr. Shebel.
Whereas, since the Revolutionary War, more than 1 million American soldiers have died in battle and military conflicts. Their families, who have endured these losses and the accompanying grief, are known as Gold Star families. And whereas, named for the practice of families hanging service banners in the windows of their homes with a star for each family member in the armed forces, deep blue stars were displayed for each living member serving, and they were replaced with gold stars if their loved one lost his or her life serving our country and protecting our freedom. And whereas Grace Darling Seibold founded the American Gold Star Mothers in 1928, her son George was serving in World War I, and while he was abroad, she channeled her worry into visiting hospitalized veterans. When the letters from her son stopped arriving and she learned of his death, she took action in her grief, and with a group of mothers established American Gold Star Mothers Incorporated. And whereas since 1936, Gold Star Mothers Day has been honored through presidential proclamation as the last Sunday of each September. And whereas the acts of heroism and the stories of courage of each fallen soldier are forever remembered in the minds and hearts of their families. And whereas, while national monuments and memorials serve as strong visible reminders for the men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice in service to our nation, Gold Star families are a living legacy of each fallen soldier and can help us all remember and honor these heroes by name. And whereas, long after the battles have ended, as our stars and stripes of liberty fly, the families who have at home a folded flag and an empty seat at the table deserve our respect and support. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 73rd General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, honor the pride and the pain of the parents and partners and children and siblings of our fallen heroes, and recognize the families of these proud patriots with an expression of profound gratitude and respect.
Representative Burnett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Two of my uncles served in World War II, but I was too young, and they never talked about it. But I have, over my career, had the honor and privilege of working with many retired military. And, you know, to all military families, as a mother, as a daughter, as a sister, as a wife, I can't imagine the bravery you had in watching your loved ones go off to serve. To Gold Star families, I can't imagine the grief when you learned of your loved one's passing. All I can say, and I say it for all of us, thank you. Thank you for the loved one's service, and thank you for your sacrifice.
Assistant Minority Leader Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, if you've ever had the chance to get to talk to a Gold Star spouse or a Gold Star mother, it's pretty remarkable. You can't help but just stand in awe of just the sacrifice that their family has borne, and that the legacy that they stand up each and every day to make sure that their family member, their spouse, their child, whoever that is remembered. This body, about 2 years ago, come Monday actually, we had the opportunity to adopt a resolution, and there's a section of Highway 24 in El Paso County, around where I live, Falcon, Colorado. We renamed that section of the highway after Sergeant Major James Gregory Ryan Sarter. Deanna Sarter, his wife, lives in Falcon, but that 7-mile stretch of highway along 24 is just a constant reminder for anybody that passes through. There's a marker at each end, and it's just an opportunity for folks in the community and those that are just passing through, just to see his name. For those of us that actually know the Sarter family, it's a constant reminder of their sacrifice for this great nation. I'd like to share with you just a small little poem. It was drafted around World War II, written by a Gold Star mother, and it goes like this. It says, "God, I did not want my son to go, that you and I know. But if it was willed for him to die, I'm proud it was for the flag waving high. Those who see me through the window pane do not know how I hoped in vain that my son might return to me and fully enjoy this land of the free. God, I am only one mother whose love cannot be replaced by none other. Others know the loneliness that comes later, but selfishly, I think my grief is greater." For all those Gold Star families, we thank you and we stand in awe of your sacrifice.
Thanks to both of you. Let's vote, and then we'll do co-sponsors. See no objection. The question before us is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1011. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Joint Resolution 1011 is adopted. Representative Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We move the current roll call of the House be added as co-sponsors.
See no objection. The current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Joint Resolution 1012.
House Joint Resolution 1012 by Representatives Snyder and Lynch, also Senators Garcia and Heisey, concerning reaffirming Colorado to be the permanent location of the United States Space Command and in connection therewith, urging the Department of Defense to keep the United States Space Commands in Colorado.
Representative Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you too, Representative Lynch.
We move for the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1012 and ask that it be read at length.
That is a proper motion. Mr. Schiebel.
Whereas our nation and the world have significantly benefited from the technological and scientific advances resulting from space exploration and aerospace activities, and Colorado is paving the way for new discoveries in the frontiers of space by having a rich history in aerospace development and being at the forefront of space travel, exploration, and aerospace research. And whereas Colorado is the acting provisional space command base, and it will remain the provisional base until 2023. Colorado is also the center for United States military space operations and strategy. According to the Colorado Space Coalition, the state's military commands are the primary customers for space-based research, development, acquisitions, and operations, representing nearly 90% of space-related expenditures by the military. Moving the United States Space Command, U.S. Spacecom, to Huntsville, Alabama will be incredibly disruptive to the national defense strategy. In addition, it will cause a major upheaval in existing infrastructure and jobs in the state, which will result in higher costs and less efficient outcomes for the United States military. And whereas Colorado is strategically located at the center of our national and space defense, we are the home of five key strategic military commands: North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, United States Northern Command, US NORTHCOM, United States Strategic Command's Joint Functional Component Command for Space, JFCC Missile Warning Center, the United States Air Force Space Command, and the United States Army Space and Missile Defense Command / Army Force Strategic Command, and 5 military installations, including United States Air Force bases Buckley, Cheyenne Mountain, Peterson, and Schriever, as well as Fort Carson Army Base. And whereas the 460th Space Wing of Buckley Air Force Base provides operational command and control of 3 constellations to space-based infrared missile warning systems, has been defending America continuously since 1970 and is a critical part of global defense and national security. And whereas Colorado leads the charge in bringing current and future GPS assets to life, a service provided free to the world by Air Force Space Command in Colorado Springs. From the operation of GPS satellites by Schriever Air Force Base to GPS-3, the most powerful GPS satellite to date, being designed and built by Lockheed Martin and launched by United Launch Alliance, with Raytheon developing the command and control capabilities, and with companies such as Boeing, Harris Corporation, Braxton Technologies, and Infinity System Engineering also supporting GPS development and operations from locations in Colorado. GPS technologies enable an integral part of our global economy to have an incalculable impact that has improved the everyday lives of billions of people around the world. And whereas Colorado's airspace industry is home to a broad range of companies that creates products and systems for commercial, military, and civil space applications, such as spacecraft, launch vehicles, satellites, command and control software, sensors, and navigation operations. These companies include Ball Aerospace, Boeing, Digital Globe, Harris Corporation, Lockheed Martin Space Systems, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Sierra Nevada Corporations, Teledyne Brown Engineering, and United Launch Alliance, which make up a large portion of the aerospace sector. And whereas Colorado has an existing educated workforce, ranked second in the nation with residents with a bachelor's degree or higher, and a pipeline of higher education institutions to sustain future growth, we are home to the United States Air Force Academy and many colleges and universities, including the University of Colorado Boulder and the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, Colorado School of Mines, Colorado State University, Metropolitan State University of Denver, the University of Denver, Colorado Mesa University, and Fort Lewis College. Altogether, they provide access to world-class aerospace-related degrees and offer aerospace companies one of the country's most educated workforces. And whereas Colorado is home to some amazing research institutions, these institutions include the prestigious Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics at the University of Colorado Boulder. It began in 1948, a decade before NASA, and is the world's only research institution to have sent instruments to all 8 planets and to Pluto, combining all aspects of space exploration through science, engineering, mission operations, and scientific data analysis. And whereas Colorado is also home to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Space Weather Prediction Center, a world-leading center for predictions for the solar and near-Earth space environment and the nation's official source of watches, warnings, and alerts of incoming solar storms, using satellite observations to protect and save lives and property. Whereas various organizations are key to Colorado's prominence in aerospace, such as the Colorado Space Coalition, a group of industry stakeholders working to make Colorado a center of excellence for aerospace, the Colorado Space Business Roundtable, working to bring together aerospace stakeholders from the industry, government, and academia for roundtable discussions and business development, and to encourage grassroots citizen participation in aerospace issues. The Colorado chapter of Citizens for Space Exploration, whose mission is to prompt better understanding of aerospace and its importance in our economy and daily lives, as well as to promote the importance of human space exploration. Manufacturer's Edge, a statewide manufacturing assistance center that encourages the strength and competitiveness of Colorado manufacturers to provide on-site technical assistance through coaching, training, and consulting, by providing collaboration-focused industry programs, and by leveraging government, universities, and economic development partnerships. And the Space Foundation, founded in 1983 with its world headquarters in Colorado Springs, Colorado, which holds an annual space symposium, bringing together civil, commercial, and national security space leaders from around the world to discuss, address, and plan for the future of space. And whereas, for the aforementioned reasons, it is in the best interest of the American taxpayer to keep U.S. Spacecom in the state because Colorado is already fulfilling the missions of the U.S. Spacecom. Because Colorado Springs has in place the community infrastructure capacity and the community support to champion an expanding mission. Because the move will cost the United States billions of dollars to relocate the facility, and because the move would severely disrupt the Colorado aerospace industry, which has grown to support the mission. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 73rd General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that we, the members of the General Assembly, recognize Colorado's unique blend of military installations and major commands, private aerospace companies, academic and research institutions, and government entities, and the valuable synergies these ecosystems provide. Strongly urge the Department of Defense and the Biden-Harris administration to reevaluate the merits of this irresponsible decision and should rightly conclude that it is the correct decision to keep the existing United States Space Command in Colorado. Furthermore, strongly urge the Department of Defense and the presidential administration to permanently base U.S. Spacecom in Colorado, recognizing that Colorado provides the existing command structure, base infrastructure, and communications platform necessary to successfully host additional national security initiatives and ensure coordination of efforts without committing additional funds. Proudly express that Colorado has deep ties with the Department of Defense, an immense patriotic commitment to providing for the nation's security and bolstering our defense. Express our most sincere and deepest appreciation to all service members and civilian employees working in and supporting military and civilian aerospace companies, military installations, and civil organizations in Colorado, and hereby declare Colorado to be the prime location for the permanent headquarters for U.S. Spacecom.
I didn't know Pluto wasn't a planet. I'm joking. I did. All right. Representative Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as you heard, Colorado is currently the acting Provisional Space Command through 2023. And Colorado and El Paso County particularly are uniquely qualified to continue to be the home of U.S. Space Command. The resolution described all the support and infrastructure we have here in Colorado that's already in place and already supporting Space Command. You know, national security and protecting our country and the world is not and cannot be a partisan issue. It is too important. By every metric, Colorado is the best and most qualified home. A rash decision made in the heat of a political campaign should not and cannot stand. We renew our request to all decision makers to do what is best for our country and our national security and to do what is right and make Colorado the permanent home of U.S. Space Command.
Representative Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that's the result of letting OEDIT write resolutions. I would just like to say that. You know, this is exciting to talk about the future of the military, and that's what Space Command really is. Though we're here to honor those who have fallen, and no doubt we have lost folks in the Space Command, but not at the hands of our enemy, but at the hands of progress. But I couldn't resist this opportunity as a veteran to talk a little bit about what it means on Veterans Appreciation Day for me. Number one, it means that I'm available for lunch. It also means that this is a group of people that were willing to lay down their life for something. So if you think about that for a minute, that's not a lot of what we see in today's society, but people that are willing to die for something. It also means we're able to be put into uncomfortable situations. You leave your home, you go, and you are put in an entirely different world. It also means that you're willing to look past socioeconomic backgrounds, gender, and race, and come together really to create a winning team, and that's what we've done over the years. It also means you don't need to be recognized as a veteran, because you truly did it because it was an honor to sacrifice for the greatest endeavor of freedom in humankind. Thank you.
Thanks to both of you. Let's vote first. Seeing no objection to a voice vote, the question before us is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1012. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Joint Resolution 1012 is adopted. Representative Snyder.
Mr. Speaker, we move that the current roll call of the House be added as co-sponsors.
That is a proper motion. Seeing no objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Joint Resolution 1013.
House Joint Resolution 1013 by Representatives Esgar and Locke, also Senators Garcia and Simpson, concerning the 54th anniversary of the capture of the USS Pueblo by North Korea.
Majority Leader Esgar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We move House Joint Resolution 1013 and ask that it be read at length.
That is a proper motion. Mr. Schiebel.
Whereas the USS Pueblo was originally launched as a United States Army cargo ship in 1944, but was transferred to the United States Navy and renamed the USS Pueblo in 1966. And whereas the USS Pueblo was named for the city of Pueblo, Colorado, and the county of Pueblo, Colorado, and was the third ship in the naval fleet to bear the name Pueblo. And whereas, after leaving Japan in early January 1968 on an intelligence mission, the USS Pueblo was attacked by the North Korean military on January 23, 1968. And whereas, according to United States naval authorities and the crew of the USS Pueblo, the ship was in international waters at the time of the attack. And whereas one crew member of the USS Pueblo was killed during the attack, and 80 crew members and 2 civilian oceanographers were captured and held for 11 months by the North Korean government. And whereas this year marks the 54th anniversary of North Korea's attack on the USS Pueblo and her crew. And whereas the USS Pueblo is still in commission in the United States Navy, but continues to be held by the North Korean government and is currently a museum in Pyongyang, North Korea. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 73rd General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that we, the members of the General Assembly, recognize the bravery and sacrifice of the crew of the USS Pueblo, that we take pride in the fact that the USS Pueblo bears the name of a city and county in Colorado, and therefore the citizens of Colorado should be aware of the incident that occurred with the USS Pueblo 54 years ago. That we continue the call for Kim Jong-un and the North Korean government to return the USS Pueblo to the people of the United States. And that we hereby designate January 23rd of each year as USS Pueblo Day, a day to remember and honor the brave crew of the USS Pueblo.
Majority Leader Esgar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the 8th year in a row I've brought this same resolution. And I'm sure the folks that follow me will continue to bring this resolution until we actually bring the USS Pueblo back home. Many of you may know, and many of you may not know, that Pueblo is actually known as the home of heroes. And that's just not a name we gave ourselves. We actually are home to 4 Medal of Honor recipients, 4 of them. Pueblo men who fought in different wars to make sure that we keep this country as safe as possible. I'm a proud granddaughter of a U.S. Navy man and of a U.S. Army infantryman. Every year we celebrate the military, and every year I actually cringe that we need to bring this resolution again. And many folks say, why do we keep talking about a boat? A ship, thank you, a ship. I'm in trouble now. Not only is it just a ship, but it's the symbol of what happened. Every year, we've officially honored and remembered Fireman Dwayne Hodges, who lost his life on the USS Pueblo, and the 82 crew members who were imprisoned for 335 days and subjected to torture. We may have our Americans back home, but we don't think that's enough. The USS Pueblo is still abroad, containing thousands of top secret documents and equipment under North Korean control. We always want to remember and honor the brave crew of the USS Pueblo, and we will continue to demand its rightful return to American soil. So no, it's not just a ship. It was real lives, real people impacted by what happened. And we demand that that ship be brought back here. And some of us joke that we'd love to see it in the Arkansas River in Pueblo. However, I don't mean to make light of it. And I don't mean to make light of 8 years in a row now I've stood in this well saying the same thing. I appreciate your grace in hearing it once again and understanding and sharing the feelings that we have to make sure that the USS Pueblo will always be remembered and honored. And then when we have it back on American soil, maybe somebody else will bring a resolution to celebrate that moment.
Representative Luck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I prepared for today, I watched a few clips of some of the 82 men who were, as Majority Leader Escar pointed to, held captive and tortured for almost a year. As I watched the emotion well and then stop in their throat, it occurred to me that more than that ship was left in North Korea. The trauma that those men endured caused many of them to leave their innocence, their joy, and to some degree even their hope on that land. As I've heard you all speak today and reflected further, it seems to me that many in the military have left pieces of them where they've served. And so while I join Majority Leader Escar in this body in asking for this ship to be returned to the United States, I am grateful for the opportunity to remember there are men and women among us today who aren't whole to the degree they were before they signed on that line and said, yes, I will serve this nation. They walk around with a degree of brokenness for what they've seen, what they've heard, what they've experienced. And so today, in addition to honoring our call for that ship to be brought home, let us too honor all of those pieces left on lands far and wide by those who have said, indeed, this is a country worth fighting for.
Thanks to both of you. The question before us is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1013. Seeing no objection to a voice vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Joint Resolution 1013 is adopted. Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We move that the morning's roll call be added as co-sponsors.
That is a proper motion. The morning roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title of House Joint Resolution 1014.
House Joint Resolution 1014 by Representatives Ortiz and Sandridge, also Senators Lee and Liston, concerning the designation of a portion of Colorado State Highway 21 from Kettle Creek to Woodman Road in El Paso County as the Sergeant First Class Will Lindsay Memorial Highway.
Representative Ortiz.
Mr. Speaker, we move that the adoption of HJR 1014 and request that it be read at length.
That is a proper motion. Mr. Schiebel.
Whereas Will Lindsay was born on August 26, 1985 in Cortez, Colorado, to Grant and Tammy Lindsay, graduating from Montezuma Cortez High School in 2004. And whereas Will joined the United States Army immediately after graduating high school, enlisting on July 7, 2004, and married the love of his life, Sarah Unger, in 2010, and together they had 4 daughters who were the center of their world. Whereas, after completing basic training and airborne school, Will volunteered for and completed the Special Forces Selection and Qualification courses, earning his Green Beret in July 2006, and was assigned to the 10th Special Forces Group Airborne at Fort Carson, Colorado, as an Assistant Operations and Intelligence Sergeant with Alpha Company, 2nd Battalion. And whereas on February 6, 2019, Sergeant First Class Will Lindsay deployed to Kunduz Province in Afghanistan in support of Freedom Sentinel 8 and 11, Operation Warhammer. And whereas the deployment had a high operational tempo, as the goal of Operation Warhammer was to establish peace in the region by bringing al-Qaeda to the negotiation table. And whereas on March 21st, 2019, during operations in Kunduz City, Sergeant First Class Lindsay's element came under heavy volumes of effective machine gun and small arms fire from multiple directions and from enemy positions as close as 25 meters from friendly locations. And whereas under heavy contact and exposed with little cover, Sergeant First Class Lindsay immediately directed his element to lay down suppressive fire and employ hand grenades against nearby enemy fighters to suppress the enemy firing positions. And whereas Sergeant First Class Lindsay's element immediately sustained casualties from enemy machine gun fire, and the detonation of an improvised explosive device rendered his machine gunners unconscious. And whereas, without hesitation and full knowledge of the enemy threat, Sergeant First Class Lindsay continually exposed himself to enemy fire to suppress enemy machine gunners with his individual weapon and hand grenades. And whereas Sergeant First Class Lindsay's actions provided covering fire for wounded personnel and medics attempting to establish a hasty casualty collection point to provide critical treatment. And whereas, realizing that his element contained multiple wounded in action and was in imminent danger of being destroyed by enemy machine gun fire, Sergeant First Class Lindsay completely exposed himself in the open to place more effective fire on the enemy and was wounded by enemy machine gun fire. And whereas, despite having been wounded, Sergeant First Class Lindsay bravely and selflessly maintained his position, suppressed the enemy forces, and coordinated the approach of friendly forces coming to his element's aid. And whereas, in a final attempt to defeat the enemy, Sergeant First Class Lindsay sprinted across an open road in an effort to mark enemy positions and regain the initiative from the Taliban. And during this attempt, Sergeant First Class Lindsay was mortally wounded. And whereas Sergeant First Class Lindsay's conscious decision to continually expose himself to heavy volumes of fire from a determined, entrenched, and well-equipped enemy undoubtedly protected the lives of all within his element and directly contributed to the fatal wound he suffered. And whereas Sergeant First Class Lindsay was killed in action when he succumbed to his wounds on March 21st, 2019, in Talaka Village, Kunduz Province, Afghanistan. And whereas during his 15 years of service, Sergeant First Class Lindsay deployed 7 times, 5 deployments to Iraq, 1 to Tajikistan in support of a counter-narcotics mission, and 1 to Afghanistan. And whereas Sergeant First Class Lindsay's military decorations include the Silver Star Medal, 4 Bronze Star Medals, 1 Meritorious Service Medal, a Purple Heart, a Combat Infantryman's Badge, a Military Freefall Jump Master Badge, and a Master Parachutist Badge. And whereas Sergeant First Class Lindsay was a devoted husband, dedicated father, and true son of Colorado, who held a deep love of hunting and fishing and working with his hands, and would often shame his friends on the golf course with his mid-70s game. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 73rd General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that a portion of Colorado State Highway 21 from Kettle Creek to Woodman Road be named the Sergeant First Class Will Lindsay Memorial Highway in honor of Sergeant First Class Will Lindsay's lifetime of honorable service and heroic sacrifice. That the Colorado Department of Transportation may accept and expend gifts, grants, and donations for the purposes of the initial placement of signs to mark the designated section of Colorado State Highway 21 as the Sergeant First Class Will Lindsay Memorial Highway. And that the Colorado Department of Transportation may explore a cooperative agreement with the Board of County Commissioners for El Paso County for the maintenance of signs marked with Sergeant First Class Will Lindsay Memorial Highway. And be it further resolved that copies of this joint resolution be sent to Sergeant First Class Lindsay's wife, Sarah Unger, the Colorado Transportation Commission, the Department of Transportation, and the Special Forces Foundation, Colorado Branch.
Representative Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, you may be seated. I did not personally know Will Lindsay, but I don't have to for him to be a brother. and for his family to be considered my family too. That is one of the most uniquely intense and beautiful things about service in our armed forces. It's knowing that regardless of era you served, number of deployments, faith, or anything else, you are family. And your family are also mine to support and care for. Whether you were a Vietnam-era vet that was shamefully treated when you came home, or the daughter of a paratrooper that fought and bled alongside his brothers in the 101st, or the widow and children of a brother lost in Afghanistan, you will forever be one of mine, and I will forever be one of yours. At this moment, I would ask whether you are a service member, a veteran, or family of those, whether you know this family or not, to stand if you will forever consider them family and offer them your support. Forever family. You're not alone. Please be seated. At this time, I want to recognize the family that we're here to honor and their loved one that we're here to honor. Sarah, Scotland, Evelyn, Richland, and Graceland, please stand and be recognized and honored by this chamber. This has been a long time coming and got derailed because of everything that was going on with COVID, but it is an honor and privilege to be able to do this for this family. You're noticing a theme in a lot of what I'm saying. That's why I love Vet and Mill Appreciation Day, because it kind of feels like a family reunion of sorts. So for that, it was an honor to show the respect that Will Lindsay deserved and to honor your sacrifice as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ortiz, and thank you to the family for being here. We honor your sacrifice. The question before us is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1014. Seeing no objection to a voice vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Joint Resolution 1014 is adopted. Representative Ortiz.
Mr. Speaker, we move that the current roll call of the House be added as co-sponsors.
That is a proper motion. Seeing no objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Members, that has brought us to the end of the resolutions. We will, in a moment, go into recess and then allow any member, Senate or House, to come down and address the body and address any of the resolutions of their choice to honor Military Appreciation Day. Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House stand in recess for purposes of the House and Senate members to address the House.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess.
Members, if you want to speak, please come down into the well, and what I'm going to do is alternate between senators and representatives. And Senator Gardner is our first speaker. Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President. Colleagues, each year we take time to honor our military members, our veterans, their families, and their sacrifices. And we do so through a variety of resolutions honoring veterans of particular eras, of particular groups. And that is appropriate in that each and every veteran member and family member has a story, an important story. But it is also important that we recognize this as a single recognition and honoring of our veterans collectively. Why is that? To be a member of the military of the United States requires you to take an oath. It's an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to bear true faith and allegiance to the same. And it joins all members over years, decades, in a common sacrifice and a common commitment. Now, there's a difference, and for those of you who have not had the privilege of serving, this may not have immediately registered with you. In the United States, there's only one status that you're required to do what they tell you to do as a legal duty. When you take the oath to be a member of the United States military, you take an oath to go wherever they tell you to go, whenever they tell you to go, and however they tell you to go. And sometimes you are fortunate and you get orders to go someplace near a beach. And other times you get orders to take the beach. I also think that what brings members of our armed services together is that each and every one of us who have taken that oath at some time in our lives took the oath no matter what the policy was, no matter who the elected leadership was, no matter what the strategy was, no matter what rules of engagement were imposed upon us. I was reminded of that this year, this summer, in the scenes from Kabul airport. Whether our engagement there, the strategy there, the policy there was right or wrong is for another place and another time and another occasion. Our servicemen and women who served there were there because they chose to serve and took the oath and placed themselves in harm's way. We talk about various service members on this day. I thought that one service member stood out in a way that spoke volumes about our military, about our country. Sergeant Nicole G., serving in the United States Marines at Kabul airport as part of a contingent. You saw her photograph holding in her arms, cradling an Afghan infant. On the day that I saw that, I thought, and if you ever wonder, that's what our military is about, and that's what our country is about. That young woman, along with 12 of her comrades, lost her life a few days later. That sacrifice is what our military is about. And if you ever wonder, and you need it in a single thought and a single image, her sacrifice, her service, holding that child in her arms is what our country is about. I'm pleased to honor our service members, and God bless each and every one of them and their families.
Thank you, Senator. Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would be remiss if I didn't come down and talk quickly about my grandfathers and my brother-in-law, who all served this great nation. You've probably heard me tell this story before, again, being the 8th year I've honored him, but my grandfather re-enlisted after his ship, the Arizona, was bombed in Pearl Harbor. He came back and re-enlisted again because he believed so much in fighting for and standing up for everyone in this country. Most recently, my brother-in-law served 3 times in Afghanistan. He and his family, including my adorable niece, who's now 9, live in North Carolina. And he, too, doesn't like to talk about what happened in Afghanistan. But every year, I stand in this well and I honor him and tell him thank you. So I felt it was necessary to do that again today. There's also one other person who is near and dear to me and has truly become someone as a brother to me. United States Marine Corps Rank Corporal Leroy Garcia, as you all know, is the Senate President, who's leaving us here and heading back into another job, Special Assistant to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. Not sure what that all means yet, Mr. President, but we've had many conversations about the time you've served, and I just wanted to make sure that today, the Military Appreciation Day, the last one I get to share with you, as we sit together every year, as we honor the USS Pueblo together every year, that we took the time to thank you for your service in the Marine Corps, and thank you for your service to the people of Colorado. And truly, from the bottom of my heart, wish you nothing but success in D.C. I would say you'd be missed in Pueblo, but maybe you won't be. I got to give my big brother, who's younger than me, by the way, he calls himself the big brother, nothing but love and gratitude. Thank you for everything. Thank you for the time you've served us in the military, in the Marine Corps. You've taught me so much about what being a Marine really means. As much as I rib you and give you a hard time about it every single day, truly from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, how y'all doing? See, ain't nobody asked that question yet to y'all. How y'all doing? Y'all can talk back. I'm blessed to be able to stand before you today in recognition of all those who served, but in particular, House Joint Resolution 22-1007 concerning recognition of African American veterans. We all have had folks, whether they were directly family members or friends who've served in the military, and we honor those folks today. For me in particular, it's my father and it's my grandfather. And they would tell me that black veterans have fought in every war the U.S. has engaged in with contributions to our country's defense dating back to the 1700s. They were the 1st Rhode Island Regiment fighting for America's independence in the Revolutionary War, and the 1st Kansas Infantry taking freedom into their own hands against the egregious institution of slavery. During World War II, they were the Harlem Hellfighters, the 1st all-black Army unit to serve overseas, and later the 688 Central Postal Directory Battalion, the only all-black women's unit serving overseas during the Second World War. Even now, the number of enlisted African Americans continues to grow. Today, black people make up 17% of our armed forces, while being an estimated 14% of the U.S. population. Time and time again, they have served and continue to bravely serve this nation with a selflessness, a leadership, and dignity that all of us here can aspire to. But let us not forget that while our veterans honor us with their service, we must do more in honoring them in addition to this resolution. Throughout President Harry S. Truman's term, many black servicemen wrote the president about their harrowing experiences. One of the most influential letters came from Isaac Woodard, Jr., a World War II veteran who, hours after being honorably discharged from the U.S. Army, was dragged off of a bus and beaten until blind by the police in Batesburg, South Carolina. 70 years later, today, we still have homeless veterans, unemployed veterans, veterans suffering from physical and mental health ailments. Let us honor them by the policies that we pass and the resources we can provide to make their sacrifices and their lives better as they have enriched ours. Let us commemorate their heroism by honoring them not just today or this month, but every day. We're grateful for your support of this resolution, and thank you for recognizing all those who served, especially those who happen to be African American.
Thank you, Senator Coleman. Representative, no, we're alternating, and she's put her hand up, so we're not doing together. But I will put you on the list, Representative Ricks, but Representative Daphne Michelson-Janae.
Hello, members. We are standing before you as parents of active duty military members. My son, Staff Sergeant Ryan Janae, is in the Artillery Battery of the United States Marine Corps. I just want to explain for a minute what that means when at the top of every news hour we hear the words, boots on the ground. Our children are those boots. And I ask that when you hear those boots on the ground messages, you recognize that there's mom, dad, grandma. My son gave birth, or my daughter-in-law gave birth. Our son brought into our life via his wife, our beautiful granddaughter, Evelyn. Does Evelyn get to grow up with dad? And that's a question we think every time we hear the words, boots on the ground. You know that my grandfather served in World War II. My father served in Vietnam. My husband served in Operation Desert Storm. And our son is active duty now. What do we say he served in? So far, it's been pretty good. The hardest thing I think he's told us he's done is he was sent this year to Norway to train in the cold, and they made him jump into the water with all his gear on. And they videotaped it, so we had the pleasure of watching. But he did that polar plunge. What's he getting ready for in the cold weather? Doesn't take too long to put pieces together. So on behalf of Representative Pico and myself, we just ask that you remember that every time you hear those words, boots on the ground, they're talking about our children. Thank you to everyone who served. Thank you to my family for a legacy of service, Representative Pico's family for a legacy of service, and we thank you.
Thank you. And I'm just going to go over the list. Fields, Senator Fields is next up. I also have Senator Liston after that, and these are alternating. I have Representative Pico, Representative Ricks, and Representative Exum. I've never seen others raise their hand. And Beaver. So, Senator Fields.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Good morning, colleagues. You know, when we gather together like this to celebrate our military families, it's one of my favorite times. The reason I can say that is because my dad was a career soldier. A career soldier. He enlisted. He was not drafted. And I can remember growing up, my mom and dad, my mom was a military wife, and I was their love project.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
I got an A.
They taught me an appreciation for service, sacrifice, and humanity through the love that they extended to me. I saw the pride that my father demonstrated every time he had to don or put on that uniform. My dad was over 6 feet tall. He was very, very handsome. And he was even more handsome when he put on that uniform. And so, if you know anything, and you do, about military, is there's a sense of discipline and order that they're trained to perform. As a little girl, I can't remember the date or the time, but my mom and dad sat me down, and my dad told me he's been deployed, and he was going to Vietnam. I have never heard of that word before, Vietnam. Didn't know what it really meant. Because typically when he was deployed, I was deployed too, and we would all go together. But this time his deployment was to Vietnam. My dad served two terms in Vietnam and one tour in Korea. And what I remember after he left, how much I truly missed him. Because my mom was so diligent at making sure that we had breakfast together, that she prepared my lunch. I was their love project. And then also we had dinner together. We were a family. But when he left, I noticed some differences. I could see the level of loneliness my mom felt. I felt something was missing because my dad was not there. And so I had to learn how to live and survive through his absence, not knowing what it was truly like to be in war. Now, in the tribute, it says 58,000 people died in the Vietnam War, and there were over 300,000 people who came back wounded. And some of those wounded people we have seen, either with mental issues or behavioral issues, or maybe physically disabled in some kind of way. But we paid a huge sacrifice for the war that we had in Vietnam. And when I go to Washington, D.C., and I take some time to go by those monuments, my dad did not die in Vietnam. He came home. So to all the soldiers that did come home, I just want to say welcome home. But when you go to that monument and you see all those names, you see people having a piece of paper and they're using a pencil to scratch the imprint of that name of that buddy that they served with. It's very intense to see that. Then once I found out what Vietnam was all about, I had conversations with my mom. They were difficult conversations because she really never told me about them until after my dad passed away from cancer. He was exposed to Agent Orange. and he died of pancreatic cancer. My dad never told me, but my mom told me about the jungles that he was in and the impact the war had on him once he came home. And when she describes the jungle, it wasn't a good picture in reference to what he was experiencing in the jungle in the midst of battle. But my dad was never scared. He never gave me any impression that he was scared because he signed up for the work and he signed up to be a soldier. So, Dad, I hope you're resting easy up there in heaven. God bless you, and God bless the United States.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Ricks.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, or Pro Tem. As we honor the brave men and women who have served in our military and are currently serving, I think about some of my favorite Civil War heroes. At the beginning of the Civil War, Black people were barred from bearing arms for the U.S. Army, despite their military contributions to the American Revolution and the War of 1812. In fact, early in the war, the Union sent escaped African Americans back to their slave owners. Later, the Union Army began classifying escaped slaves as contraband of war or property taken from the Confederate lines. However, in July 17, 1862, Congress passed the Second Confiscation and Militia Act, freeing slaves who had masters in the Confederate Army. And by the fall, African Americans were allowed to enlist in the Army, but only in segregated units commanded by white men. The war recruitment effort was slow until Black leaders like Frederick Douglass encouraged Black men to become soldiers to fight for the dream of full citizenship. By the end of the Civil War, 179,000 Black men, 10% of the Union Army, served as soldiers in the U.S. Army, and another 19,000 served in the Navy. Nearly 40,000 Black soldiers died over the course of the war. Black soldiers served in artillery, infantry units, and also several essential non-combat functions: carpenters, chaplains, cooks, guards, laborers, nurses, scouts, spies, steamboat pilots, surgeons, and teamsters. On the day that General Lee surrendered to Appomattox Courthouse, there were more African American soldiers fighting for the Union than all Confederate forces. In all, 16 Black soldiers won the Medal of Freedom for their service during the Civil War. I also want to share some stories about Susie King Taylor. She was the first and only African American woman to write a memoir about her experience in the Civil War. Reminiscences of my life in camp with the 33rd United States Colored Troops. After escaping slavery with her uncle as a child, she joined hundreds of formerly enslaved refugees at the Union-occupied St. Simon's Island of the Georgia coastline. At only 14 years old, she became the first Black teacher to openly educate African Americans in Georgia. Later, Taylor joined the 1st South Carolina Volunteers as a quote-unquote laundress. While the typical laundress was just a woman who laundered soldiers' clothing and sometimes filled canteens, Taylor did much more, including gun maintenance, nursing, educating the men and women of the regiment. In 1902, Colonel Trowbridge of the 1st South Carolina Volunteer Infantry apologized for the technicality of Taylor's identification as a laundress rather than a nurse. Such a technicality led to her never receiving a pension. However, history remembers Taylor as the first African American nurse. I want to talk about some others that stood out in this important thing. William Carney, he was born into slavery in Norfolk area of Virginia. William Carney escaped servitude as a young man on the Underground Railroad to join the rest of his family in Massachusetts. It was there that he eventually signed up to join the war effort in 1863 after President Lincoln signed the decree allowing African Americans to serve in the Union Army. The regiment Kearney joined was no less than the famous 54th Massachusetts. Sergeant Kearney, the unit's first color bearer during the action, after several of his compatriots had died, he picked up the banner and survived the assault. The incredible valor he displayed under fire, planting the flag atop the walls of the fort and safeguarding its return to the Union lines, despite several wounds, represents the earliest action for which a black soldier was awarded the Medal of Honor. Then we think about Alexander Auguster. He was a pioneering war doctor. He moved to Canada to earn his medical degree before returning to serve as the Union highest-ranking black officer during the Civil War. He received a major commission as head surgeon in the 7th U.S. Colored Infantry, the Army's first African-American physician out of 8 in the Union Army, and his highest ranking of African-American officer. His rank did not shield him from racism. He was physically attacked in Baltimore for wearing his officer uniform. Complaints from white subordinates led Lincoln to transfer him to run the local Freedmen's Hospital in 1863. After the war, he practiced medicine and became the first black medical professor and one of the original faculty members of the new Medical College of Howard University, where he stayed until 1877. And also Abraham Galloway. Galloway posed as a slave to gather intelligence from Confederate troops. He set up a spy network in parts of the South and encouraged thousands of enslaved men who had South protection under the Union lines to take up arms to gain their freedom. He helped raise 3 regiments of United States colored troops. Galloway was part of a delegation of 5 Southern black leaders to the White House to demand Lincoln support black civil rights. He organized state and local chapters of the National Equal Rights League, and in 1865 helped to lead a Free People's Convention. In 1868, he became the first black man elected to the North Carolina legislature, fighting violent voter suppression by the Ku Klux Klan in the process. And then there's Robert Smalls. There's so many, but you know, we as a silver. Anyways, these are all the brave men and women and more that have fought. We salute these brave men and women, and we remember the bravery, the steadfast patriotism, and sacrifice for us to be here free today.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Liston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, majority leaders and minority leaders, oh, excuse me, they're not here, sorry, but members of the legislature. I'm going to read you a few names and see if these mean anything to you. Marine Sergeant Michael Strank, Marine Corporal Harlan Block, PFC Franklin Sousley, Corporal Renee Gagnon, Corporal Ira Hayes, and Navy Corpsman John Bradley. Now, quite frankly, don't feel bad if you don't recognize any of these names, as most people don't know them either. However, you might recognize the famous photograph. That is engraved in the minds of most people, as these were the men who raised the flag, the iconic picture at the top of Mount Suribachi at Iwo Jima 77 years ago this month. All of these soldiers were ordinary young men who willingly and gladly fought for our country in World War II. They asked nothing in return of their heroic efforts except the hope to go back to their friends and family after the war and lead a productive life. Sergeant Strank, Corporal Block, and PFC Sousley never made it off the island. They were just 3 of the 7,000 Marines who died during the month-long battle at Iwo Jima. 20,000 Marines and sailors were wounded at Iwo Jima, fighting to preserve our freedom and the ability for each and every one of us to be here today, most of us taking our liberty and way of life for granted. We are gathered here today to honor the service and sacrifice of the 16 million men and women who served during World War II. Some 450,000 Americans made the ultimate sacrifice in World War II. Does the name Donald Stratton or Joe George mean anything to you? Probably not. Some of you might recall. Donald Stratton was one of the few survivors of the USS Arizona, which was obliterated in the attack at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. He survived with burns over 75% of his body and was only rescued by the valiant efforts of Joe George, boatswain's mate. George defied orders and threw a rope to save Donald Stratton and several of his shipmates from the burning Arizona. Donald Stratton was medically discharged due to his injuries, but not really in an unusual act of valor. He re-entered the Navy in 1943 and fought for our country until the end of the war. Joe George, his rescuer, was killed before the end of the war. Here's another name that you might not recognize, Ellen Ainsworth. Women played an integral role in the fighting for our freedom in World War II as well. Ainsworth was a 24-year-old Army nurse whose hospital got hit with a shell during enemy artillery bombardment during the Battle of Anzio in Italy. Despite her injuries to herself in the hospital, she calmly moved patients to safety. Her selfless act are even more heroic, considering she died of her wounds that she received just 6 days later. Her heroism was rewarded with the Silver Star and the Purple Heart. She was one of over 400 military women to lose their lives during the war. Obviously, I could go on and on and on about thousands of individual vignettes about what Americans did in World War II. There are literally tens of thousands or maybe even millions of stories that could be told and retold. We've heard, seems like millions of them here today, all showing acts of sacrifice, bravery, and heroism. The point we should know is the historic struggle that we know as World War II was not just about the Eisenhowers, the Pattons, and the MacArthurs, and the so-called generals, but what young, ordinary, patriotic Americans from all parts of our country and all walks of life, who in the prime of their young lives stepped forward to defend our country. You know these men and women as they are your grandfathers, your fathers, your uncles, your brothers and sisters, and yes, even your mothers. Most are not alive today, as we have heard, but we all owe a debt of gratitude to them that can never be fully repaid. However, if you still have the opportunity to meet someone from the greatest generation, don't just thank them, but maybe give them a big hug, or better yet, a well-deserved salute. Just so that we all know, of the 16 million service members during the war, upwards of 1 million were Black Americans. Over 33,000 were Japanese Americans, and tens of thousands were from nationalities from all over the globe, whether Italian, Filipino, Hispanic, Polish, and many, many others, who gladly wore the uniform of the United States. So as World War II becomes more of a distant memory, or only a footnote taught in the history books, it is only fitting that we give recognition to all of the service members that saved our country and, in fact, the world from oppressive dictators. To our veterans, all gave some and some gave all. God bless America and our World War II veterans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Next is Representative Exum, and hopefully you can put the picture down and allow, there he is. Representative Exum?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. The Tuskegee Airmen were the first Black military aviators in the U.S. Army Corps, before there was even a U.S. Army force. Trained at the Tuskegee Airfield in Alabama, they flew more than 15,000 individual sorties in Europe and North America during World War II. They destroyed or damaged 36 German planes in the air, 237 on the ground, as well as nearly 1,000 rail cars and transport vehicles, and a German destroyer. 66 Tuskegee trained aviators were killed in action during World War II, while another 32 were captured as POWs after being shot down. Despite these tragic losses, overall impressive performance earned them more than 150 distinguished flying crosses and helped encourage the eventual integration of the U.S. Armed Forces. After the war, several of these Tuskegee Airmen trained aviators moved or returned to their homes here in Colorado. And I'd like to take a few moments to recognize just one of them who did, Frank Macon of Colorado Springs. From a young age, Frank knew he wanted to be a pilot and took every opportunity he could to learn about airplanes. As a freshman at what's now Palmer High School in Colorado Springs, Frank designed planes, put away money, and earned working part-time at a garage toward flying lessons at the airfield. He was a senior in high school when the U.S. entered World War II. He quickly signed up for the Civil Air Patrol, a civilian organization founded to help the war effort, where he learned about the nation's first group of African-American fighter pilots, the Tuskegee Airmen. I didn't know anything about Tuskegee, Frank later said. There was a segregated service at the time. Some of the generals and people were very much against having black pilots. Eventually, Frank made it to Alabama and enlisted in the U.S. Army Corps in 1943. He began his military flight training the next year as part of the Tuskegee Class 45A, where he flew various aircraft. Despite having a severe head cold, Frank went up in a flight in a T-6 during training and ruptured both of his eardrums. He was forced to miss graduation and spent nearly a year recovering. By then, World War II had ended. But he didn't lose sight of his dreams. Frank earned his wings and returned to Colorado Springs, where he worked for 23 years at Fort Carson and returned as a head aircraft maintenance. While he raised his family, Frank also ran a machine shop fabricating electronics, research, aviation accidents professionally, and wrote, studied, invented, and worked with kids. In 2019, he established the Frank Macon Trade Scholarship Charitable Trust, which funds and provides scholarships to young people who want to learn a trade. Frank Macon died in November 2020 at the age of 97. Tuskegee Airmen aviators like Frank played a pivotal role in World War II and in many other air combat engagements. And many of these men were also heroes in their communities back home, giving these men an immense privilege and honor. Please join me in honoring these men for their bravery and sacrifice and their achievements. Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you, Representative. Next is Senator Heisey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. While I am sponsoring the resolution on the Space Force in the Senate, I'm really here to talk about the USS Pueblo resolution. Only one man lost his life in that conflict. His name was Dwayne Hodges. He came from my small town in Oregon, probably less than 1,000 people living there at that time. I didn't know Dwayne. He was a little older than I was. But when Captain Butcher when they were released and sometime after Captain Butcher came to our school, we had an assembly. We all gathered. What I remember the most out of that, there weren't many military people in my area. Most of our dads had served, but like most World War II vets, they didn't talk about it much. But I remember him standing down there in dress uniform. We stood for the Star-Spangled Banner, and you could see him moving his mouth. And, it just struck us because typically you stood, somebody else sang. But he said later, he explained it during the assembly, he would never, ever hear the Star-Spangled Banner again without singing it. Dwayne Hodges' dad erected a small memorial in front of their humble home there in Cresswell, Oregon, complete with the flagpole light on it so the flag never had to come down. And that was the way we all knew Dwayne Hodges and his dad. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Next is Representative Vandever.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's so much we can say today. Military Appreciation Day. When teaching my students about the sacrifice and the principles that this country was founded upon, one of the first things we discuss is the jaw-dropping number of individuals who have given their measure of either full devotion or have served their fellow man through protecting our nation. It's millions upon millions upon millions over the course of our history. And when I think about that number, as an educator, we have to bring it down to a moment when we value the individual who has made that choice, because that is the only way that will make it real. It's the only way we will help them feel what it means to experience the principles of the United States of America and all that we were founded upon. And so when I think about the name, the individual, the one face, I think about a lot of things. Today, it's obvious to think about the people we love and know. My father was an in-flight refueler. And the reason that this comes to mind today, for several reasons, obviously, is not only because he was my father, but we talk a lot in this building about the jobs and the college degrees and the opportunities about what we will do here to ensure that Americans can go live the lives that they want to reach their full potential. Well, my dad's life was a life interrupted at DU. Both he and his brother, prior to the beginning of Vietnam, received a full ride, full scholarship to the University of Denver. And as his older brother went on to the campus and began his college career, 3 years later, my father followed. And when my father got there as the middle son, the draft board showed up on campus. And the draft board showed up and said, "You're the middle child. Ray, you have an option. You can join or you can be drafted." Now my dad, and it's not just quite that simple, but it's pretty close as the story goes, and I'll take my dad's word for it. And when they showed up and said, "You can join the military or you can be drafted, those are the odds you're facing," my dad, ever the negotiator and the thinker, because he was smart, decided, "I'll join." And he said, "I'd like to fly in a flight crew. I'd like to be in the Air Force." And they said, "Yes, you can be in the Air Force. You can pick any branch you want." He took it a step farther and he said, "I'd like to be on the flight crew." They said, "Sir, you don't have an officer's status. You don't get to be on a flight crew." And my dad replied with, "Are you sure about that? There's no position on that flight crew that's not for a private." And they said, "Well, there is one. It's called a fueling in-flight specialist. An in-flight refueling specialist." Now, what is that? Tactical locations are often long distance from supporting airfields, which means the aircraft may require refueling mid-flight. Operating a specialized boom from the back of a KC-135, a plane that's probably a little bit bigger than this room, an in-flight refueling specialist pumps thousands of gallons of jet fuel into aircraft in need of fuel. These highly trained experts must have a steady hand, and he did, and nerves in order to complete the remarkable and crucial task of refueling a jet down below so that you can continuously allow them to successfully complete their mission. Now that's a fancy name. It's a in-flight refueling specialist. My dad knew them, and they were called Tigers in the Sky. These are the gentlemen with a calm, cool hand who helped those in the air, who gave cover to those with boots on the ground, everything they needed to ensure we were successful as possible wherever our armed forces would go. I'm proud to say my father received the Blue Nose Group Arctic certificate that almost no one in the armed forces has, as top secret, except for Andres Pico, as he flew over the Arctic Circle, refilling those jets. I have a picture on my mantle. That mantelpiece, that picture shows his viewpoint laying in that glass bubble, looking down that boom, with him doing one of the most highly dangerous jobs that the military has. Because if he didn't have a steady hand, he not only killed everybody on his plane, but the plane down below as well. The second thing I'd like to share today is the face, the individual, the person that I got to meet on the Capitol steps this week. There was a gentleman, and I will call him by his first and middle name only, John Michael. And he stood out on these steps, and he told me a story because he held a sign begging for our time and attention as representatives and senators, where he wanted to bring awareness to veteran suicide and the stories about the broken parts that were left behind. See, I listened to some of you today. He wanted to be heard. So what I would say today is, to everyone who has ever served, to all of the families who have children who do serve, to all of us who are one big family, honoring Military Appreciation Day, I hope you stop. I hope you listen. I hope you hear their stories. They are dying to be heard, and it is our duty to do so. Thank you for listening to me today, and thank you to each and every person who has ever served in the military, because you have chosen to give of yourself, your life, for each and every one of us, because as we all know, freedom truly really isn't quite free.
Thank you, Representative. Next is Madam President Pro Tem Donovan.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. What a beautiful chamber, and what a treat to be able to come over here and address this shared time together. I'm rising to speak to House Joint Resolution 1009, honoring Colorado veterans of the World War II. A 95-year-old World War II vet recently reflected on why he fought. They put people down. He simply describes the evil forces that our nation responded to in battle. World War II, the Holocaust, and the divisive hatred that fomented the war deserves and demands our attention, if for no other reason than to prevent us from repeating it. But yet we creep closer to a day when we have forgotten what we fought against. Over 200 World War II vets die each day. And the voices of that 95-year-old World War II vet who simply described they put people down are being lost. My grandfather's voice is lost. We creep closer to a day when we have forgotten what we fought against. We ban Maus, a book about the Holocaust, and we creep. There are those who will recast violence in a new light, and we creep. There are those who even question the validity of democracy, and we creep. I am the descendant of the greatest generation, and we cannot disrespect them by participating in or standing by as quiet accomplices to actions that seek to divide, to highlight hate, and to challenge an indivisible nation. If for no other reason, we must honor our World War II veterans to prevent us from repeating the evil that they fought. Let us be inspired by them. Let us not creep closer to a day when we have forgotten what we fought against, but instead, in the words of the 10th Mountain Division and of my Bronze Star combat infantry grandfather taught me, let us climb to glory.
Thank you. Next, we have Representative Judah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I would also like to very much recognize the 5,000 Muslims serving currently in our U.S. military. one of which is my family member, who's a lieutenant colonel at the United States Air Force. And I also want to give a shout out to my father, who answered the call for our United States Air Force and was the acting Muslim chaplain for our cadets. Members, we also need to recognize that Colorado has now welcomed 2,000 Afghan SIVs, special immigrant visa recipients. And these Afghans put their lives on the line, the lives of their families, to translate for our troops. So I think it's only fitting that we elevate their service. And in 2008, one of those SIVs made his way to Denver, and that was my husband, Maitham El-Shadud. So I'm going to brag for a little bit. After serving the equivalent of 4 back-to-back tours in Iraq as a combat interpreter for our troops, he also put his life on the line, the lives of his family, and being on the actual front lines with our troops, watching many of his own countrymen and women lose their lives for choosing to be combat interpreters as he made his own way to Denver. After working really hard and putting himself through nursing school to become a medical transplant nurse at UC Health, he wanted to pay it forward. His education was put on hold in Iraq and here in Colorado. So he teamed up with Majority Leader Senator Fenberg, then Representative and now Senator Winter, and Representative Michael St-Jeannet to pass unanimously the in-state tuition bill granting all SIV recipients, immigrants, and refugees in-state tuition upon resettlement in Colorado, rather than having to be forced to wait 2 years for Colorado residency. So I know I can express their gratitude for the 2018 legislative members for recognizing and honoring their service. Members, he now works for the United States Congress. He is the Deputy Chief of Staff for Congressman Crow, a vet himself. If that is not the realization of the American dream itself, then I don't know what is. I personally want to thank all of our SIVs for their service, and I look forward to witnessing your journey to your American dream.
Thank you, Representative. I have no more senators on the list. Representative Pico, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I'm just going to build a little bit on what Representative Michael St-Jeannet was talking about, our family members, in our case, our children. We have 4 children in service right now and a son-in-law, so that would make 5. 3 of them are deployed overseas or at sea, and my son-in-law, the tanker pilot, and I have no idea where he is. He could be anywhere. But that goes to the point of many of our service people are overseas. They are deployed in a current international situation that is about as tense and dangerous as I've seen in many years. And so I offer the hope and prayer for all of them, all of those overseas, all of those headed overseas, whether they know it yet or not, and hope for and pray for their safe return. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And the last person I have on the list is Representative Bacon.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you for the opportunity to speak again. We wanted to acknowledge a community, in particular for their service. And while we may have shared touch points in our ancestry, none of us here in our chamber are formally enrolled members of any of our tribes. And so in order to recognize their service, we hope to say a few words today and send this note to them. Native Americans are highly regarded within their tribal communities for their dedication and commitment to serving in the armed services throughout America's history and up to the present day. American Indian and Alaska Native people serve in the U.S. Armed Services at a rate higher than any other group. According to the 2010 census, it is estimated that over 150,000 veterans identified as American Indian and Alaska Native alone. The U.S. Department of Defense estimates there are currently over 24,000 active duty Native service members in the U.S. Armed Forces. The Native communities have always held their warriors in the highest esteem. Their dedication to service stems from their roots in having been protectors of this land for thousands of years. We want to say thank you for your service and that we see, recognize, love, and support you.
Thank you, Representative Bacon. Seeing no one else who wants to be recognized, the House will come back to order. And that brings us to announcements and introductions. I have a quick one. Representative Lontine will replace Representative Young on Public and Behavioral Health and Human Services on Tuesday, February 8th only. Representative Michelson-Jeannet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and this message is for the Public and Behavioral Health and Human Services Committee. We will be meeting at about 1 o'clock, just after 1 o'clock, in room 112, where we have a sunset review hearing on the Strategic Action Planning Group on Aging. We're going to discuss an additional sponsor for the Sunset Bill on the Speech Language Pathology Practice Act. We're going to hear bills 1041 and 1035. Don't miss out.
Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a pleasure to serve with you. I have permission to be excused on Tuesday, February 8th.
So approved, and it's an honor to serve with you too, Representative Young. Representative McCluskey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Joint Budget Committee will convene at 1:30 p.m. today. Thank you.
Representative Michelson-Jeannet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have permission from the Majority Leader to be absent on February 18th, March 15th, and March 16th for a series of surgeries.
We hope they go well, and you'll be excused. You won't be absent. So approved. Representative Luck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, the character trait that I had picked actually during the interim on my little handy sheet was courage. And I didn't even know that it was the day that we were going to honor so many courageous folks. So to all of those in here who have served, thank you for your courage. In this building, courage can manifest in different forms. Sometimes it can be lighthearted, like yesterday in Finance Committee, where Representative Valdez A. came fully committed to his bill and demonstrated courage in doing so. We appreciate that commitment.
And Representative Luck, do we have a photo of that? We do? Should we put it up, or?
I think that would be wonderful.
Permission's granted from the Majority Leader. I do want to ask A. Valdez, is there permission to show the photo? Oh, wait. Okay. All right. No, it doesn't look like a picture's needed. Very good. Very good. Okay. Sorry, Representative Luck.
No, that's wonderful. Live and in color and more courage right there. So sometimes, obviously, that courage in this building takes a different form. And in fact, I did get a couple of notes in the box. This one is from Representative Sandridge to Representative Michelson-Jeannet. And he says to you, you are a champion of the Jewish people. Never let up and make sure no one ever forgets. And so thank you for your courage to stand for the Jewish people. And then this other one is actually awkward for me, but it is a thank you to Representative Sandridge and myself because we attended the training in person on Monday. And so I just wanted you guys to know, thank you for putting things in the box. Thank you for courage. Thank you for stepping out in this building and for defending the policies you believe are helpful. And I will, once again, just let you all know that I so value you and love you and adore you and find you amazing. And even though we often don't agree, and even though there's often things that come up, I just want you to know that I look forward to always seeing you guys.
Thank you, Representative Luck. And anyone who puts a nice message in there about me gets one late bill. Majority Leader Escar.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pretty sure I get to sign off on those late bills as well.
That's
so
right. It's not how it works. It's not how it works.
Oh,
Okay. All right.
okay.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, thank you so much for a good week. I appreciate you all and hope you have a great weekend. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move the House stand in recess until later today.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess till later today.